This is Yes Music Podcast episode 444. Who's that under the stage? It's Casey Young, and he's happy to talk about it.
Hi, this is Alan White from Yes, and you're listening to Yes Music Podcast.
Welcome to episode 444 of the Yes Music Podcast, Two Fans' exploration of the world's greatest progressive rock band. I'm your host, Kevin Mulrine, and co-host Mark Anthony Kay will be along in a little bit. You can always get involved with the podcast via the various different ways on the site, yesmusicpodcast.com. It was a genuine pleasure to speak to Casey Young this week about his contribution to the 90125 tour. Stay tuned for that fascinating discussion later on, and I think, like us, you'll learn quite a bit. Around the virtual socials this week, and starting with many thanks indeed to everyone who's been in touch in any way this week, including the commenters on last week's show notes, Doug Curran and H.B. Pedersen.
Whatever your progressive rock question, the answer is yes.
So we're delighted to have international man of mystery, Casey Young, with us today to talk a little bit about 90125, the tour. So welcome, Casey.
How you guys doing?
Very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'll start off here. So what kind of work were you doing before you got involved with the Yes?
I was a session synthesist in Los Angeles and actually out of Portland, Oregon. And I had been playing with Gary Wright before Yes. Mm-hmm. I had done quite a few records, actually, the year that I went out with Yes. I think I had 3 number one records and 3 number one soundtracks. And it was a hell of a year. I worked with Michael Cimbello. Yeah. Wow. And Madonna that year, and did this soundtrack with Vince DiCola for Staying Alive, I believe it was that year. Yeah, and they were all nominated, so my recording career was taken off like crazy. Yeah. I can thank Gary Wright for that. He's the guy that really brought me in town. I did the album called The Right Place.
So before you started working with Yes, though, what was your opinion of them?
Oh, I loved Yes. I actually went to see them at the Coliseum in Portland twice. I got to see them one year with Rick Wakeman, and then the next time they came through, they had Pat Mraz with them.
Right.
So I was a big fan. You know, I mean, I'm a synthesist. You know, what are you gonna do?
Absolutely. Yeah. So here's a rather easy question, but it's always something that people kind of, have a hard time answering is, what is your favorite Yes album?
Well, any of the ones that I was on. That's hard to say. There's bits and pieces from a few different ones, and I haven't sat down and critically listened to every one of them, although I think I have them all on vinyl. But my record player's been broken for some time, so I think the last record I played was in the 80s sometime. I usually listen to music in the studio. I like to listen to music in a really good environment. I can't stand listening to music in a car. It makes me crazy, so I just put on background noise, Yeah. But, the 90125 record, I thought was a wonderful record. There was good bits and pieces all over that record,
Yeah. Well, as a studio musician, what did you think of the production of 90125?
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, that was a game changer on that. I remember the first time I heard that record, I stopped in my tracks and I'm going, who the hell is that? I know that voice. And I was listening to Owner of a Lonely Heart.
Yeah.
And as a studio guy, who wouldn't listen to that record and go, wow?
Yeah.
And it was just a few weeks later that I ended up getting the call to go design Tony Kaye's keyboard rig.
So I'm going to throw in a quick question here for all the gear nerds out there, including myself. What were some of the kind of main keyboards you used around this time?
I had a custom-built keyboard rig. I had an AMU modular system with, if you want to get really techie, with a 4060 keyboard on it, wired into an 8-voice Oberheim, wired into a Jupiter 8 and a DX7, all talking to each other on one keyboard. So I was one of the first guys to come to town with a multi-voice polyphonic multi-layer synthesizer system. And I had what was called the EBU Blue Box, which was a 16-voice polyphonic synthesizer with 160 oscillators in it. And that was originally built for Patrick Gleason. So I had quite a system, and that was one of the reasons that I was getting a lot of calls in town, because I could go into territories that the other guys couldn't touch.
Yeah.
So how did you get the job as a second keyboardist for 90125 tour?
That's a long and sordid story. Well, I got a call in 1983, and I had to think about this yesterday because I knew you were going to ask me this. And from a gentleman that I knew by the name of Tim Meyer. Mm-hmm. And Tim Meyer was like a guitar tech, like deluxe for like many bands. Eric Clapton, I can't remember who he was with at that particular time, but he knew my my keyboard design chops and my synthesizer programming. So he called me to ask me if I could design a system for Tony Kaye, because I hadn't met Tony yet, and to reproduce the sounds on that record. And I got the record, and I said, yes, I can. And so they hired me to design that system, and I put that rig together, which was a very fancy rig for 1983. If you remember correctly, MIDI was just coming in. It wasn't like implemented on everything, so we had our work cut out for us. So anyway, I designed the rig, and then they wanted me to program it. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to Lidditz for the rehearsals to help Tony kind of get going on get him ready for the tour and see him off, because I had a boatload of stuff to do back in LA. And anyway, about halfway through the rehearsals out at Clare Brothers, Tony was talking with the band. We were all standing around in a circle kind of, and Tony, if I remember correctly, they wanted him to add another sample and another this and another that for, I think, the song Hearts or something. And Tony says, I'm full up. All my presets are loaded. The system isn't going to do anymore. My left hand's busy and my right hand's busy, and I can't do it. And Chris was standing there, and he looked at me and he said, well, he can. and I looked around, trying to figure out who the hell he was pointing at, and it was me. And I said, I'm not going. I can't go. I've got sessions. I've got stuff to do,
Yeah.
And it just so happened that I had a pretty good little keyboard rig back there. I had another E1, Emulator 1, and a Jupiter 8, and the DX7, and some other stuff. And we talked about it over the next couple days, and finally John came into my room. He says, come along with this. Run away with the circus. Just give it a try. Give it a try for a few days and see if you like it.
Goodness me.
So that was kind of how that whole thing started. 2 years later, I was still playing with the band.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had no idea at that stage that it was going to be this epic global tour?
Absolutely not. Look, I just came off a run of having major #1 records. My records were nominated for 3 Grammys, 3 Golden Globes, and 3 Oscars. Mm. That's a pretty good run to decide. And I was working with Phil Ramone. Mm. And yes. That's a pretty good run to decide that you're going to run off on tour with a rock band, because I've been working my entire life to become a session player, you know?
Yeah.
And I was still trying to figure out if that was a smart move or not, but I had a wonderful time. Look, everybody has their ups and downs on one of these types of tours, and overall it was a wonderful experience, and I certainly learned an awful lot on that tour, and from each one of those guys. And Trevor and I are still friends. Trevor and I did gigs before and after that record. I did the John Miles stuff with Trevor. I think I played around on his first solo record, and I brought him on some sessions that I was doing. When you play with Yes, a lot of the guys that are working with Yes, like Paul de Villiers, who was Yes's live engineer, he brought me in when we were doing the Mr. record. Welcome to the Real World. I'm all over that record. And it was kind of funny because Paul brought me in and he wanted my Yes Live record. My Yes Live keyboard rig. And I was going, why? I have this nice studio keyboard rig. And he actually went right down my preset list, my set list, and said, give me this, or give me Hold On, or give me this, or give me that. And if you listen to the Mr. record, you can hear a whole bunch of the Yes sounds on that record.
That's amazing.
Fascinating.
That's brilliant. So does it surprise you that people like us are still interested in your participation in these live shows?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a wonderful band, and I understand. And I was kind of the hidden secret for a while. They weren't really. They never started out to have an extra keyboard player.
Yeah.
I was an afterthought. So everybody has to understand this. And there was no room on stage. The stage was already set. If this would have happened a few months before, I probably would have been on stage.
Yes.
The next tour that I was going to go out on, which would have been Big Generator, I was set to be up on stage. Chris had picked out an outfit for me, and I was going to be the crazy mad doctor up there making sounds and stuff, and he had it all laid out,
Yeah.
But it just never worked out, and that's probably best for me to stay in town and stay out of the way. I did go out on tours after Yes. I went and played with Vangelis for 3 years.
Yes. Somebody mentioned that to me. What was he like to work with?
Oh, that Vangelis is on a whole nother level than rock and roll, and that's there's some crazy stuff there. He is wonderful to work with, and his gigs, his concerts that we did, holy crap, that's a whole nother deal than a rock band. Just the backstage, it looked like a castle. It looked like, it was amazing. And the people that are hanging out, you got to watch out what you're saying. It's not like at a rock show when you can kind of walk backstage and have your fun. It's like you're talking to the king of whatever, or the president of here, and all these people. And gosh, don't talk to her, or her guard will kill you. But that was wonderful, and he's such a great player. Jesus, that guy can play, man. He almost played with Yes.
Yeah. So the great stories about when he almost became the Yes keyboard player. Absolutely.
Did you ever talk to Chris about it?
No, unfortunately not. No.
Yeah, he told me stories about that. Chris and I spent a lot of time together, so I got a lot of stories, although a lot of them I can't remember anymore because it was 30 years ago, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Let's call it 20 years ago.
One thing I wanted to kind of touch on really quickly, since we were just talking about this whole hidden, under the stage bit. This sort of thing is not uncommon. I just finished reading a great book about Judas Priest, and they had a second drummer hidden under the stage. Ozzy Osbourne has been known for bringing a vocalist with him on tour, hiding him off stage that sang along with him. So were you aware of this sort of happenings, like within the music world?
I was, and I never thought about it happening to me, of course, but I was. And I knew a guy, and I was trying to think of who he played with. And, gosh, it may have been Elton John. Yeah, it did happen. And funny enough, I became like this huge, popular, under the keyboard stage guy that I was getting calls that just scared the hell out of me. I remember I was at my apartment one time with some friends of mine, and Keith Emerson called me.
Right.
And that's a pretty good call. And he wanted me to go on tour with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And this was around 1986, I think. And maybe it was for that new record that they had done that Trevor...
Emerson, Lake and Powell, wasn't it then?
I think it was Emerson, Lake and Powell. That sounds right, because the keyboard player from Trevor's band ended up producing them. And Keith was having a lot of problems with his wrists back then. And he needed some help. He wanted me to do some programming for him, and some of this and some of that. And when he called me, I think I was playing with Michael Jackson. And besides being a little scary to go play with Keith Emerson.
Yeah.
Because you need some chops for that. And I was working with Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson, and the bottom line was there was a lot of money involved. I hate to sound like that guy, but since I was spending like $100,000 on a new synclavier, it was kind of important to me at that time. I don't know if the people that listen to this know, but guys like me that were running it around, we had like $500,000 keyboard rigs in town.
Yeah.
And we had to pay for those. So the money did come into play. Just for keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. But I got calls from Van Halen. I got calls from Styx. I got calls from all kinds of bands to do the same thing. And I just didn't want to be the under the stage guy so much anymore.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't make me bad, but
Absolutely not. No, this makes your role in Yes unique, of course. Now, I just want to talk about the famous Keyboard magazine interview that does the round from time to time. And you mentioned that you did for Yes a lot of vocoder parts and vocal reinforcing. So
yes, I did.
Looking back now, how would you define your role in the live mix, and what exactly did you do live?
Well, it was changing. It was always changing. I started out by flying in a few samples, doing the little boat horn thing, because that was the one that threw Tony over the top. He couldn't find a way of getting the samples into the machine fast enough, and then it started out with one of the changes, vocal samples, changes, one of those things, and then John came up with this idea. He wanted a vocoder, and of course John goes, I want a vocoder. Let's get a vocoder. You're going to start playing vocoder. And he goes, you know anything about vocoder? And how I said, Harold Boat is a friend of mine. He invented the vocoder. So, yeah. And I really knew vocoders well. And we got a vocoder out there, and they decided that they liked it. And after that, all hell broke loose. John kept handing me parts. He goes, play this part tonight. Or, one of the famous things he did, he gave me this napkin that he wrote at lunch. And as we're walking up the stage was in two parts. They'd walk up to the top and I'd walk up under.
Yeah.
And he handed me this parts. And he go, here, play this tonight. And I'm going, are you kidding me? This is Yes. Come on, man. I got to practice. And, I'm going to jump in on Roundabout. Yeah. Okay. He had a lot of faith, man.
Absolutely.
So anyway, it kept evolving, and it started out just a few bits and pieces and some parts here and there, and to the point of I was playing in every song shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff. I even ended up on the plane during the day. I got a Casio keyboard so Trevor and I could go over parts, which was kind of a mistake because I got a lot of parts handed to me. And I was even doubling Trevor's guitar solos in places. I think in Maybe It Can Happen, the guitar solo in that. Yeah, well, you guys are taxing my memory. It's been a while.
So, what would you say was the most challenging song to play from that offstage position?
Doubling Trevor's lead guitar parts. That was hard. Also, John wanted me to play some stuff in Soon, which we never really got in sync very well.
Nice.
Because he was up on stage and I was below the stage, and then he'd say, come on, Case, I know you can do it. And I'm going, oh, crap, man. Because we didn't have the eye coordination I couldn't follow along with him. So anyway, Tony took over those parts, and then I played a little vocoder so he could vamp on the vocoder for that.
Yeah.
So as we all know, there's a lot of different keyboard players that went through Yes throughout the years. So who is your favorite keyboard player from Yes, and who do you think has the similar style to yours?
Well, my favorite keyboard player would be pretty much any of them that was playing with Yes. They all brought a different thing. If you listen to that band, since keyboards played such a important part of their music because of the orchestrations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, one of these or one of those samples. So the band's sound would change dramatically when they brought in different keyboard players. So, I like them all. I'm going to have to say Pat pretty well blew me away when I saw him taking some solos.
Yeah.
That was something.
Do you think he's stylistically the most similar to you?
I would have to say, as far as soloing, yeah. If you listen to some of my solos on some different records, you would probably make a little bit of that comparison. Yeah. But I'm not like he's like a virtuoso. I'm like I'm a synthesist that got turned into a keyboard player. My first real instrument was drums, and keyboards were an accident for me. So I always had to practice a lot to learn my parts, so it was always hard for me. Thus, you can see when Keith Emerson called up, say, "Hey, man, what's happening?" That I almost fainted,
Yeah. So have you kept in touch with any of the guys that you played with in Yes?
I just saw Trevor not too long ago. I went and saw them when they played in Phoenix. I try to go see them once in a while, and it had been many years. Chris and I used to stay in touch a little bit. Trevor and Trevor's wife and I were always friends. John would usually call me once in a while, but that was more or less when he needed me to do something for him, more than to say hi. Let's go have a glass of wine or something,
Yeah, so what do you think was the best aspect and the most challenging part of working with Yes?
Working with Yes?
Yeah.
I mean, look, that's a tough gig, you guys. Look, I mean, everything is changing. It's evolving. The set list, the songs, who's playing what and where, and the timing and everything, and the push and the pull of the grooves is really hard to master. Alan's a wonderful drummer, and he drives that band like crazy, but he's dictating what's going on. It's you follow me, I'm going here. Yeah. Okay? And there again, from my standpoint, I was like the extra guy, and I was on the bottom of the totem pole there, and I got parts laid on me all the time, and I had to try and come up and nail them, because if I didn't, there was hell to pay later on that night.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because what's interesting about this when you talk about it is that, nowadays shows are so structured. I mean, I follow a lot of different bands and do other podcasts as well. And one other band that I follow is Kiss. And those guys are so structured. Like every single show is the same thing night after night after night. And there's a lot of click work. I mean, I can understand how you might think this is a very difficult gig, because obviously there was no click, things like that. And things were changing all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. No click, no sequencer, no nothing. Everybody now, and I'm talking pretty much 100% of the bands that are out there now, because I still go out and do production, but I'm not generally playing. I'm doing the engineering side of it, which is a whole other career for me. Yeah. They're playing tracks. Everything is doubled, and I swear to God, the better the band sounds, the better their engineer is for playing back those tracks. And it's not because fans are trying to fool anybody. It's just that sound got so competitive out there because of the bands that maybe didn't sound so great, all of a sudden sounded wonderful. Wow, what a great sound. And, oh, Christ, those guys couldn't play Louie Louie on a good night, So and now you've got the really good bands that are trying to keep up with that. And so they're doing a little bit of enhanced track work live kind of a thing,
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a credit, I think, on the 9012 Live video for Yes, but do you ever wish you had been more visible?
There was parts when, in South America, I was up on the side of the stage. You could see me from anywhere.
Right, okay.
I wasn't really hidden. There again, the plan was for me to go on up top later on, as far as I knew, but I'll tell you what, for how I got thrown into the fire, to get thrown in probably 10 days before a major tour, and all of a sudden you're playing for, holy crap, Yes, and I think it took a load off, that I could be downstairs and just go do my bits and not have to worry about entertaining on top of that, because I really had to concentrate. That was a tough gig, man. I mean, really, there again, I hate to keep saying this, but it was Yes, man. Everybody on that tour was always trying to make that tour better. All the roadies, the technicians, the front of house, the monitor people, clear out to Roy Clare would fly out with them to make sure the sound system was right. That Yes was a high-end client for Clare Brothers, and he wanted to make sure everything was right. From the sound all the way down, to the riggers, so people to get that show up. And that was a tough show to get up. At that time, that was a really highly technical show. Think about trying to do that record at that particular time, because that record was the most technical record to hit.
Yeah.
And now you have to recreate it live. So
absolutely. Do you know Trevor Horn at all?
I've met Trevor Horn a couple times. We've run into each other. I've never worked for him. I saw him when I went over to Psalm Studios to go through some of the record to pick out more bits and pieces for the samplers. And I had ordered a couple, they wanted bits and pieces for the European tour for me to add on more parts. Thank you very much. And I ordered up like 3 or 4 songs, and 180 tapes came. The stacked boxes of tapes. I'm looking at this. Oh my God,
Wow.
So it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So obviously you were very busy those days. But what are you doing like these days now? What are you doing nowadays?
I'm doing a few things because of the wipeout in the 90s we lost all of our recording budgets because of the Napster debacle of all the free downloads.
Yeah.
Everybody lost their residuals. So I kind of started remaking myself into an engineering type of person. And I specialized in doing restoration mixes for 5.1 DVD stuff, which that started a whole nother career because I was working with, Eddie Kramer, Tommy Vicari, Al Schmidt, Bill Smith, all of these guys kind of recreating some of the Hendrix mixes for surround, Led Zeppelin. I got to work on A Night at the Opera, the 5.1 DVD. Okay. I worked on an Elvis project with the Botniks.
Nice
stuff. So I got to work on a lot of classic records that no one would ever get to work on because I was kind of changing my career, and I still do some keyboard stuff here and there, and I'm actually doing some writing right now with Greg Matheson. He's a great keyboard player. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he's had many, many #1 records, and he worked with Giorgio Moroder for years, doing all that Donna Summer stuff.
Yes.
He was the keyboard player for...
Any soundtrack stuff?
There was some stuff that was going to happen. I've got my new room set up in Burbank. We were going to do the new Transformers. I've been working with my old partner, Vince DiCola. And we had done the soundtrack for the original Transformers. And of course, we did Staying Alive and Rocky IV and a bunch of soundtrack stuff together. We also had a band called Storming Heaven together, and which was a band that was a short-lived band. It kind of was a progressive pop band right when Nirvana hit and everything flipped. So we went from having a record deal to the guys going, "Yeah, thanks, guys." So, but anyway, we're looking at doing some stuff for film again, and the Transformers thing was up for us to do, but it turned out to be a goner, and this stuff that I'm doing with Greg Matheson is going to be interesting. He's got his buddies that he's writing with, Jay Graydon and Bill Champlin, Abraham Laboriel, these guys. So there again, I do more of the sound stuff for them than the playing because, with Greg around, you don't need that an extra player so much. But, he makes me play here and there.
So have you found it easy through the decades to keep up technology? Has that been, do you see that as part of your job to be right at the forefront?
Well, I stay up on the technology pretty well. I mean, but here's the deal. My synthesizer rig, which I still have, and it developed over the years. At the peak, I had a synclavier with about 1,000 voices hung on it, and we're talking about that's a major league rig.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And I still have an awful lot of that stuff, and the instruments that I had now are the ones that everybody is trying to get. You know, I still have a Moog 55. I still have an ABU modular. I still have my TX816s. I have the PPG. I have the Jupiter 8. I have the Oberheim 8 voices. You know, all of these things everybody's trying to get back at, and I kind of got them down, you know. And they all talk to each other. That was one thing that I always had for my technical rig that over most of the other guys. MIDI made it easier, but my rig always, you could address any synthesizer in the room from one spot and then layer however you wanted. So, and I still do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because I mean, the one other person that I think of when I think of synclavier is Frank Zappa, because he has so many records where he just used that to make music. Yep. I mean, well, like, what would you say is the main attraction for people that love synclavier?
Everything is right in front of you, and that sequencer just feels good, man. It's missing a lot of stuff that you have in the DAWs, and you know, this and that, and being able to kind of see everything in real time. But you know, it just feels good, and you got 200 tracks before a single bounce right in front of you.
Wow!
You know, you just keep playing. You know, you just keep opening up tracks and go. And the nice thing is, it will remember everything for you.
Yeah,
and of course, it sounds pretty good too.
Yep. That's all been absolutely fascinating. I know it's early, and you very specially got up early and got sorted out to speak to us across the world there in LA, which was absolutely brilliant. And we'd love to have you back on the show in the future to talk some more about this. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people asking more questions about it. But fantastic to bring you out from underneath the stage to speak to the Yes Music podcast listeners. So thank you very much indeed, Casey.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Casey.